All right. So we'll dive in first with some of the results from the network survey. So if you want to move on to the next slide, Julia. So just a bit of background on the survey. So the survey was conducted this summer. I think we had it out for about 2 months, looking for feedback from members of the network. And the survey data were collected using software developed by Eric, Qualia Analytics, which was actually a really fabulous platform to work with. It's been really great on the back end as well. But basically, we did the network survey in the summer of 2023, and there were really 2 different goals that we had with the survey. One was to look at kind of the motivations for members to engage with the network, and then, kind of getting a sense of how the members are interacting and how much they're interacting with the network. And then the second goal was looking kind of more related to the research that's funded by SRUC, looking at kind of the importance of community engagement and ecological data collection for biodiversity projects. And so then kind of getting the perspective from both the project delivery side, delivering biodiversity projects, as well as the nature finance that would be available to support those kind of projects on the ground. So that's really kind of the big picture of the survey. Just next click. And today what we're really talking about is just, kind of this first goal. We will be doing another webinar a little bit later, I think in a couple months, to the network to present kind of results from the second part of this. But today we're really focusing just on kind of what the member feedback was for the network. Next slide. So we had a pretty good response rate. We ended up with 96 responses out of 550 individual members. So I think that comes in at about 17% response rate, which is really great. And we had a really wide range of professional experience in nature finance field. So everybody who is from people who are brand new with working in this area to people with 40 years of experience and quite a bit of experience in the network in this area. And then we had also quite a range of different organizations that are represented in the network. So almost half of the survey respondents were from private companies, followed by public sector organizations. But still, we have representation from charities, universities, research institutions, community organizations, as well as social enterprises and cooperatives. So we have quite a wonderful mix of people in the network. Next slide, please. And then here is, we asked people in the survey to identify the organization's role relative to the network. And in this survey question, people were able to select more than one option. So, where they may have kind of multiple roles in this field, they may have selected more than one. And so really what we see is that, the majority of people in the network are engaged in some way or another with project delivery and delivering nature-based solutions, with kind of a much smaller portion of the network representing kind of the investment side, so the funding and then the finance side of things, which was really kind of an interesting result, I think. But again, quite a broad spectrum of different roles that we have represented in the network. Next slide. So this was kind of an interesting result. We asked, how involved in the network have you been up until now? And most of the responses were slightly involved. So I don't think, Eric, maybe you can clarify, I don't think that we defined what we meant by this. I think that it was a self-identified question. So, most people kind of felt that they were slightly involved in the network, as opposed to somewhat or more engaged in the network, which I think is interesting given, that we had 17% take the survey. So, the 17% that participated in the survey said they only felt slightly involved in the network. But if you go to the next slide, despite people only being slightly involved, there was, of the people who took the survey, a lot of interest in continued participation in the network. So I think that the majority of people are looking at continuing to engage in the network and excited about what it provides. And so we have that information a couple more ways. If you can go to the next slide, Julia. So looking at kind of how people view the network, we had very positive views about the network overall. So survey respondents, the folks that took the survey really felt that the network is useful, interesting, and valuable. And there was a lot of interest in continued participation in the network, which is great. As I mentioned before. Next slide. So we also asked questions about kind of the various ways that people engage with the network. And so there's kind of three areas. One, Basecamp will generate emails. And so, everybody has the Basecamp emails coming through their system. And one of the things that we found was that that's really generally an effective way of reaching and engaging members. So people were really kind of engaged on the emails and reading them on a regular basis. Then we also asked questions about Basecamp as a platform itself. And we actually found that there's relatively limited usage of Basecamp. And there was a lot of feedback that we got from members who took the survey, saying that the interface was a bit overwhelming and challenging to navigate. It had a lot of very useful information, but was sometimes difficult to find the information that they were looking for. And so there were some suggestions that people provided as well, to try to make a more user-friendly design or maybe better organize the content that is coming across through Basecamp. So that was really great feedback that we got in the survey. And then, the last kind of avenue of engagement that we looked at were looking at the online events. So we have a public calendar on the Basecamp platform where people can post various events that are happening in kind of the broader space. And so there was also really positive feedback about that public calendar and the online events that are posted within the network. So most people that took the survey have attended one or more of the events that they've found through the calendar, and people have been really satisfied with that. So that's exciting. So those are kind of that's the big picture overview of the kind of the member makeup, the member who makes up the member network, and the attitudes about the different ways that they engage with the network. And then next up, we have kind of some of the interesting results as far as why people find the Nature Finance Pioneers network interesting and are interested in continuing to engage. So the motivations for engaging with the network, really kind of fell into these four areas. So the network serves as a real-time hub for professionals to stay updated on the latest trends, debates, and developments in nature finance and climate change. So that was something that people found really great about the network. The members value the network for its role in fostering collaboration, enabling cross-sectoral knowledge exchange, and sharing best practices. So that collective knowledge and wisdom is also really beneficial to the members. And then, the network is also seen as a platform for kind of pinpointing gaps in knowledge, communication, and funding, and for building relationships to help overcome some of these challenges. So, bridging those gaps and overcoming barriers. The feedback that we got from members is that they're really keen to explore and establish new financial mechanisms that can drive investment in nature conservation and climate action. And, also members see the network as a resource for continuous learning, offering opportunities to understand evolving practices and to build capacity for effective action. So we had lots of really great feedback for why people were interested in continuing to engage in the network, which is wonderful. Next slide. As far as, questions related to the specific interests for people to be involved in the network, we had quite a range of interests. But, when you kind of look at the majority of the network, so if you look at where kind of two-thirds or more of the members who responded to the survey said, that they were really keen on understanding nature conservation finance routes, green finance, and innovative funding. So that was 80% of our survey respondents were interested in that. And then also, 3/4 were interested in gaining opportunities for networking and collaborating on environmental projects. And then we had 73% who are interested in seeking or providing information and support for delivery of nature-based projects and strategies. So if you remember in one of the earlier slides, we talked about kind of the different organizational roles in the network. And one of the things that we wanted to maybe look at is, are some of these interests different depending on whether you're, on kind of the project delivery side of things versus maybe on the funding and investment side. And so if you go to the next slide, we looked at kind of what the answers, the survey responses were for people that kind of self-identified as their as funders and grantors, financial intermediaries and investors. And then we also looked at, the respondents who self-identified as kind of providing project delivery or project developers. And what we found was that, kind of the top two interests in being involved in the network were the same across kind of both of those groups. We did see kind of an interest in more exploring community engagement and participation aspects of nature finance coming from, the finance and investment organizations. And then, from the perspective of project delivery, there was also an interest in participating in nature-based projects, including rewilding initiatives and diverse ecosystem restoration. So some more interests come in, as you start looking at who's responding to the survey. So that was interesting. Next slide. So the last thing that I wanted to present on today was just the nature finance topics that members are interested in engaging with within the network. And really what we found was that kind of the top four. So if you again look at kind of the 2/3 of survey respondents would say, business models, proof of concept, codes and standards, scientific evidence base, and financial mechanisms are kind of the top four nature finance topics of interest within the network. And again, we went back and looked at, whether these answers differ if you're on kind of the funding or investment side versus on the project delivery side. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that that really, business models and proof of concept is a really high kind of interest across the board, as are codes and standards and financial mechanisms. Whereas, when you look at kind of the top four interests on the financial or funding and investment side, it's there's an interest in policy and planning. And, on the project delivery side, kind of more of an emphasis or interest on the scientific evidence base. So I thought that was an interesting divergence. But generally, we see kind of similar interests across the board again. So that was all that I had to present to you guys today. I don't know, Eric or Hannah, if you'd like to add anything else.
Thanks, Julia. Eric, if you want to add anything, there's a couple of minutes, things you found particularly interesting, perhaps.
I think these were the main highlights. We're happy to. I've got the survey dashboard open. If people want to raise other things, I can add further details in the chat to answer queries.
And as you can tell, my team are Americans, so I've got no chance at all in getting organization spelt correctly. Any questions for Eric and Julia? Okay, well, we can perhaps discuss more in our breakout groups. Just a quick three more introductions. Tess, Katie, and Leonie. Just say who you are and what organization you work for. Tess, can I ask you to do that first?
Hi, yes. Oh, apologies, my camera's not working there. Hi, yeah, afternoon, everyone. I'm Tess Fitzgerald. I'm a consultant at Excella, with sort of a strategy sustainability consultancy, and have been, keeping up to date with the SNFP Basecamp for a while. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks. Katie, you there?
Hi, I'm Katie Medcalf. I'm Environment Director at Environment Systems. Really valuing the Basecamp. It's great. We do mapping and modelling and science to help people with their nature-based solutions.
Thanks, Katie, and many thanks for dialing in from outside. And Leonie. Leonie also might be outside, and I can introduce her as one of the co-founders of Lauriston Farm, the regenerative agriculture and biodiversity uplift project going on here in Edinburgh. All right, Julia C. will now come to you, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Julia and Hannah. So yeah, just really quickly, a bit of an overview of what was discussed and the ideas that came out of the Open Network event, kind of brainstorming breakout sessions. So the kind of main suggestions were in three areas of activity: sharing best practice, with a particular lean towards participative events for peer-to-peer learning, sharing best practice on case studies, business models, contracts, people sharing learning journeys, which I think also speaks to the second area of activity, sharing updates from projects that are currently live, that are starting up or underway. For example, the IONS projects, the Ferns, the CivTech Challenge, successful projects, and Riverwoods, and sharing inventories and maps of projects as well, so sort of detail and diagrams. I don't know if Basecamp will be able to cope with that, but we'll see. Certainly that's something we can explore. And the idea of exploring specific topics and themes came out as well, and I've kind of roughly tried to connect them to the sort of top line topics from the survey, but the main ones that came out of the network event were exploring gaps in the market, in market development from an economic capital perspective, the lens, local area, local enterprise network, Scotland, is it, scheme, the landscape focus, also exploring catchment regeneration by region, biodiversity credits, and synergies between nature finance and climate finance, or synergies between carbon and biodiversity markets. So I've added a reminder. Oh, I'll just pause if there's any comments or questions. There were some comments about the use of Basecamp as well, but I didn't necessarily include them here. These were the sort of ones that were repeated enough to make them significant. Okay, I can't see any questions. I can't necessarily see
either, Julia.
No, okay. Nothing in the chat.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So should we go into the breakout session? We're right on time.